name's Sherry Gerard, and I'm with KDAD. My title is Director of Nursing Facility and Adult Care Health Programs, and I get the privilege this morning of being our speaker for our session. This is Johan Tredoux. Johan is a board-certified chaplain by the Association of Professional Chaplains. He is serving as the clinical chaplain for St. Croix Hospice in Overland Park. Johan earned his master's in divinity from the Nazarene Theological Seminary in KC, and his PhD from the University of Manchester in the United Kingdom in 2015 in Wesleyan theology. Tredoux is the author of the book Mildred Bang's Wine Coop, Her Life and Thought. That was published in 2017 by the Foundry Publishing. Johan also blogs at Uncommon Community. It's a website that has podcasts and community events. I saw you have one coming up on the 21st at Brew Theology in KC on the next public market. That's very cool. He loves to fish in the Rocky Mountains. So presenting on Celebrating a Resident's Life, Johan Tredoux. One more thing, they're working on the temperature. I already said it's way too cold in here and they're working on it. Okay, good.
It's a privilege for me to share this time with you. I could just say I'm born and raised in the Republic of South Africa, and I grew up in Johannesburg, and they came to the States in '82. And so I married, and I got two grown kids, and I in their late 30s, and I got 5 grandchildren. My joke is that I come from Africa, and I became an American citizen, so I'm African American. I just happen to be white, so I'm the real deal. Now it's fun to be with you, and we are going to we're going to be talking a little bit about, as you can see the title, shepherding our grief and our bereavement as staff. When residents die, and how does the staff deal with grief? And then also we're going to be talking about cultural humility. And so how do we deal with all the different cultures that we engage as being part of our residents? So I'm advancing to the next slide, and that's yours truly there. And this is part of our St. Croix Hospice values: integrity, collaboration, accountability, respect, and excellence. Yeah, the next slide here, you have Cicely Saunders, who is she founded the hospice and palliative care in 1967 in the United Kingdom. And so she's responsible for establishing the discipline and the culture of palliative care. And so it would be for you, it would be fun for you to go and listen to some. You can get her on YouTube, Cicely Saunders, and you can listen to her and what is part of her passion. And so here's our objectives for our time together today. We are going to identify different types of grief and how they affect the residents and the staff. We're also going to define cultural humility and talk about that. Describe how cultural humility applies to patients, residents. Oh, I didn't advance, I'm sorry. There it is. And describe how cultural humility applies to patients, residents, staff, family who are experiencing grief and bereavement. And then also explain how hospice can help. So some of the slides they'll speak for themselves and I advance them, but some of them I'll linger and managing the time that I have with you. So and that's the first thing we want to ask is what is grief? And grief is really experiencing loss in all different levels. And it happens in our relationships, our identity, roles, job, independence, good health, security, and loved ones that we lose. I remember what happened to me when after 30 years of being a pastor, entering into the world of chaplaincy, and never thought I would do that. but because of politics and the church, when people groups are scapegoated, I felt like I needed to separate myself from that. And then you enter into, they put me in an oncology unit in my first training of residency. And there you are, you're just like, oh man, there's such a whole nother world. And your identity is just all messed up. And so I had to strip away and ask, who is Johan? Not Pastor Johan or Dr. Johan or Professor Johan. Who is Johan? And you know what? I had no clue. And for 2 years, I had to go through a journey of self-awareness and coming to terms with, oh, this is why I am the way I am. So it's really important that we recognize even the loss of identity and all the roles and the things that is. And when we don't acknowledge that loss, it goes somewhere. Carl Jung talks about the shadow part of us. And so it goes into the subconscious when we don't deal with the loss in our lives. Grief emotions, they can come from lots of experiences. And it can be very unpredictable. And there's neither right or wrong, but they need expression. I was thinking here, sometimes we have our defenses put up that prevents us from feeling our real emotions. And so Renee Brown would talk about shame, that is part of our experience where we don't feel like we're good enough, or we question ourselves and we're hard on ourselves. And she talks about shame as that the strength of it is being unspoken, not speaking it out. As a pastor, I was always expected to be nice, and I could never be angry, and yet I got very angry at some of the congregants. The last church I pastored had 900 members and senior pastors, lots of staff. We had a school as well, and I'm telling you, man. The best I could do sometimes is to put somebody's name on the golf ball and hit it really hard. But the thing is that it went somewhere where I can describe anger, but I have never been able to express it until I went through 2 years of residency of training, and my psychotherapist trainer helped me to express some of my anger. I start cussing for the first time, and expressing something that's like, oh man, pastor cussing, but it felt good after I said. I won't say what I said, but so it's grief emotions. They come at us from all different things, and it's not, we don't always know how to express it, but just be aware that it's important to go out of your head into your body, and the body keeps the score. Bessel van der Kolk, that's quite a great book to read. And we carry this stuff with us, and they trigger us. And so it's very important to acknowledge that grief is part of that. Grief can be, okay, am I already grief reactions? Where am I? Let's see here. I think I skipped something. Okay, let's just go with this. Grief reactions can really incorporate the whole person. I'm one of those theologically that believe that we don't have a soul, but that you are one, that you are very complexly made, and we deal with the whole person when we deal with residents. For you also as staff, you have to acknowledge the fact that you can't compartmentalize what's going on with you. And so physical, emotional, and behavioral, these are some of the grief reactions that you will see that is part of our experience. And it's important to listen to your body, to what it's telling you. Different types of grief is a anticipatory grief, chronic grief, when you can't get past something, complicated grief, cumulative grief, delayed grief, disenfranchised grief, distorted grief, normal grief. I would say that one of the things that I share with the families is that that grief is your friend. And when that grief comes and you're triggered and you're sad, it's the body's way of healing your body. And so the grief travels with you. And I think that society wants to tell us that we need to get past the grief. Now, I'm not talking about complicated grief that you have to see a professional person. I'm talking about grief that we process as we work, that we really need to recognize that when the sadness comes and we're triggered, that it's the body is trying to help bring healing to you. And there's nothing really you can do about it. It's going to happen anyway. And so you're not working your way through grief. Grief always works its way through you. And so in my work as a chaplain, I encounter anticipatory grief the most in the care for my patients. And I also do bereavement counseling after the loved one that passed away for the caregivers. So we walk for 13 months with a family. Presently, I have 63 patients in different homes and facilities. And so I also do complicated grief counseling. I have 4 patients right now that I go to their home and I spend an hour with them every week. And it does take time, but it's all part of what we do. Here you have the classic grief of Kubler-Ross. And I've read the book. You can also, it would be good for you to go to some videos on YouTube where she actually speaks. She's right next to on the bedside of a patient. And you can listen to her speak to a patient and also addressing what's going on. So she's kind of the original ones. But I have to say that I have read this work, and she was actually dealing with a patient of hers that was terminally ill. So she observed these stages within that person who's dying. So just know that these things are not a universal principle for how everyone deals with grief, but it is, and it's definitely not linear. And so you can have more of a circular kind of phenomenon, or you can start with something and go right back to it. And so that's just our observation for where we are today. There again is anticipatory grief. I just talked about basically patients and the family experience all of classic grief before they die. And so, but it also doesn't mean that they won't grieve later as well. So secondary losses. This is also triggered as part of our anticipatory grief. This person, the loss of who that person was, the change in the relationship with other people, the loss of their role in life, the loss of their identity, the change of personality, the loss of routine, the loss of change of family support, and loss of the dreams of the future. And so when I assess a patient and I go into the room, I'm assessing the whole room. I look for symbols. I look for what's going on religiously, what's going on in their family. I look at their pictures. I always, if they're capable, if they're not dementia patient, or even with a dementia, they're capable. You just have to say what level of dementia they're at. But you can have them talk about the picture and share their story. And I think it's because of the secondary losses of their identity and everything about them, it's so important to do a life review with the patient. Say, tell me your story. What's going, not just what you do, but what were some of your passions, and just let that person talk, and you just do active listening and say, tell me more. I heard you say, and what does that tear represent? So it's very important to recognize the story of the patient and all the losses that they're going through, and then you can also be triggered as well with your own stuff. It's very important to recognize that we leave our own stuff at the door. Counter transference and transference, all of those things come into play. I have, as a chaplain, I'm trained to deal with a Muslim or a Buddhist or a Hindu person or a Jewish person or a Catholic person, and to honor their traditions and their faith. And so I never feel like I'm bringing God into the room. I always feel like, no, I'm bringing God forth because God's at work in that person's life. And so for me, I have a catchphrase that I use. And it's like, it's not for me, it's not about witness, it's about witness, to be with someone, to journey with them. Not witness your faith to them. No, it's about witness, to journey with them in their tradition and their culture, and to recognize that. And so part of disenfranchised grief is that when people, also known as hidden grief, it refers to any grief that goes unacknowledged or unvalidated by the social norms. How the loved one passed away. Suicide is still very stigmatized, and so it can become very disenfranchised in their grieving. Estranged relationship. An ex-spouse or a partner that passed away, a distant friend, a previous coworker or classmate. It can also happen if a person has had to cope with a lot of losses in a short time, or was taught to set aside their own emotions and feels it's not professional to show emotion. I'm especially mindful of and disenfranchised grief with the LGBTQ community, who are they're gay or queer lifestyle, and they are they're aging, they're resident, and how the relationships there and the affirmation that they have of the community in that facility either affirms them or feels like they need to be avoided or they're ignored. So supporting others through grief. There's no right way to grieve and mourn. Be very careful not to impose your own ideas or beliefs or expectation on others. Be present, listen and acknowledge their feelings, understand and accept other cultural and religious perspectives about illness and death, and check in with children and teens who process grief differently. We are at St. Croix, we have special grief backpacks, grief backpack. We send to the grandchildren of grandpa passed away. So we send these grief backpacks to the parents to know how to have a conversation with their kids or their grandkids on grandpa died, grandma died. And to have that conversation on a level that recognizes their moral development, their cognitive moral development, and their ability to deal with it that's age appropriate. So that's something I would really strongly recommend at the facility. Ponder that, research that. Those are kind of things that you want to have in your arsenal as tools that you can use when it's needed. Be very specific in your willingness to help. Check in frequently and be willing to stay engaged for as long as it's needed. Supporting others through grief. What to say, what not to say. Acknowledge the situation. I heard that your sister died. What to say? Express concern honestly. I'm so sorry. I don't know what to say. Is there anything I can do for you? That one is a little too general for me. I would say that it's much better because you're putting the onus on that person to come up with ideas. It's better just to say, hey, I feel like I know you. I'm going to do this for you. Expect this to come from me. Be creative in your own problem solution there and how you can help and just do it. Instead of saying, hey, a general thing of, is there anything I can do for you? It's just going to fall. It's not going to land anywhere. What not to say, I know how you feel. You don't. They are in a better place. It's God's will. You're so strong, you'll get over it. Don't cry. Oh my goodness, these things are bad. Please don't say any of those. And don't, my brother-in-law lost his daughter at age 20. She's a student at the University in Olathe. And she got killed instantly on New Year's Day when a truck hit her car and she died. And at the visitation, at a church, 600 people to pay respect. I asked Jonathan afterwards, what was the hardest for you? And he says, people who came through and they didn't know what to say, so then they tell you their own story of loss. And I just can't enforce it for you. Do not tell your own story of loss as a way to show you relate to them, because they don't have any capacity to deal with your story. They can't even deal with their own story. So short and sweet is the best. Don't tell your own story as a way to relate. So we can talk about later. We're going to have some time and questions and answers later as well. Sorry, I came a little strong there, but that's feel strong about that. Supporting colleagues who are grieving. When I did my residency at Research Medical Center, which is a level 1 trauma center in Kansas City, I was over ICU and ER for 2 years and did rounds for the doctors in the morning. And then, and during that time, it was in the middle of COVID. And while I was doing my training, 168 patients died in ICU. And there were 6 nurses there, and ICU nurses. And I knew them fully by name. And I talked to the head nurse. I said, you know, I want to just come and check on you guys. And she said, please do. And so this one day I came in and I said, hey, they're so busy, but they were able to come together. And so it was kind of like a little buddy system. And so then they locked hands like this. They stood there, all these 6 nurses, each interlocked like this. And they just looked at me and I called them each by name. And I said, I want you to know I see you. I hear, this is not easy. One of them that very morning had lost a 34-year-old young man who died of COVID. And I said, so I don't know how your religion is, but is it okay if I pray for you? And so I prayed for them. And every single one of them was in tears because we took a moment to recognize that we're not just robots. We feel and experience the grief and the loss of what happens when we lose a resident or when we lose a patient. So listen to them, what they need when they need it. Offer support in a very sensitive way. Ask how you can help. And again, I think that cumulative grief for staff, delayed grief because I'm busy, I got to move on to the next patient. These are strong culprits that causes staff to put it somewhere. You put it somewhere and you don't deal with it. And it's really important for the directors of facilities to recognize that they really need to take time with their staff when they lose a resident that they cared for, and staff meetings and all that to take the time for that and to recognize that. The expectation that we can be immersed in suffering and loss daily and not be touched by it is as unrealistic as expecting to be able to walk through water without getting wet. So this is a something that we need to help our staff to position themselves for the long haul and that they don't get burned out. And if you're going to get burned out, this is where the stuff happens in these kind of areas. Misconceptions of grief and healthcare. I cannot do my job if I'm busy dealing with grief. This is my job. It's not a personal loss. Grieving for a patient is unprofessional. I'm not affected by death. I need to move on. There are other patients to care for. When I went into my training of clinical pastoral education at a hospital, my first training unit, I was placed in oncology, and so there was 4 chaplains in training and a psychotherapist who's our educator. And he listened to our stories and he listened to my story, and I shared with him some of the losses in my life. as a pastor. Um, he looked at me and he said to me, Johan, you are a man of sorrows. And the moment he said that to me, it was like something triggered in me. All the stuff that was placed in my subconscious, it came out. And I started sobbing and crying. I mean, even triggers me right now. And he just came out and he held me. And connecting with my grief and stuff that is so suppressed, so much stuff that was there. And when it came out and he just held me, I couldn't explain it. I didn't really know how to talk about it. Later on I could, but I think that every single one of us carry loss. It has a cumulative effect to it, and we easily can get triggered. And so it's much better to acknowledge it, and to honor and to reflect on your humanity and that you're not a robot and that you're a human being. Honoring the dying. Cherish each moment with the person you're caring for a resident, and there is things that your patient would like to say, and the family, they want to honor their lives. And some of the facilities I go into, they've asked me to come in on a quarterly basis to do a short memorial service for the residents that has passed away in the last quarter. And then they usually have a picture and a little bio of those residents. And then that passed away. And then the other residents come and we are in this room and then they start telling stories about their friends who passed away. And I usually give a short eulogy and just pray with them. And but it's taking the time to do that and to plan for it. And it's not so much it's the residents who come to recognize, hey, I am respected, that I'm a real person. And when that happens for me, this is also how they will recognize me as well. And so it sends a message on how we care for our patients. When in St. Croix, I sit in a vigil when somebody is actively dying. We take turns, 2-hour turns, and we sit 24 hours around the clock with a patient so that they don't pass away on their own. And so sitting in a vigil, and it's a very, very important time to be with the families and honoring them. We are, I've heard that hearing is the last thing that goes, but in my research, I think it's smell. It's the last thing that goes to capacity. And so, so it's important to encourage the families to share their final thoughts with their loved one. And can you give me some water? Thank you. I don't know if that, okay. Okay. To honor the deceased afterwards, here are some ideas. I know that you all can come up with that as well. We in St. Croix, we send a letter to the families, the caregivers, a condolence letter, and in there is a little heart that has seeds in it. And then we encourage the families when they put it in a pot plant kind of thing with dirt, and then they water it, it dissolves, and then this plant grows in honor of the loved one. This is what we do as our initial response to families who have lost a loved one. But there is so many different things you can do, as you can see right here. All right, so we're going to go to cultural competency, and cultural humility. I was in my training, I was trained on, okay, how do you deal with the end-of-life culture of a Buddhist person or with a Hindu or a Muslim person? And so you have to remember a lot of things. And so in my training and in my research that there's quite a shift that's going away from cultural competency to putting more emphasis on cultural humility. And cultural humility is to be to have a strong self-awareness of your own biases. I grew up in apartheid, South Africa, and we had servants in the home and in the yard, and it was just it's just how I was raised. And obviously, when Mandela came and the clerk and brought Mandela out and all of that, I was raised that Mandela's a terrorist. And I fought in the guerrilla war in Angola as an 18-year-old. And all of that stuff goes somewhere, you know. And then I recognize, I would say, yes, our conscious life is the tip of the iceberg, but what's really going on is in your subconscious. And I would say probably that I'm a recovering racist, in the sense of being aware that something of my past that I'm not even consciously aware of, because things get embedded in our prefrontal cortex and it gets written there. And so you may have been raised in the South, or I don't know, I don't want to pick different parts of the country, but racism is ugly, misogyny is ugly, it's everywhere. And so just be aware of your own bias and how you will approach that. And showing respect for others' values and their beliefs, ongoing personal reflection and growth of knowledge, being honest about your knowledge gaps. It is so easy to stereotype someone because you think you know where they're at. Recognize no culture is better than another. When I first came to America, I didn't grow up speaking English, so I started speaking English after high school. And so I did my bachelor's degree in Afrikaans. My major was Hebrew, and Greek was a minor. So I come here to the seminary in the 80s. And so I came over single, and I wanted to date this girl, first date here in America. And so it was a Monday night, and so I wanted to take this girl out on a Friday night, and my English was very, very bad. And so I asked her, I said, "Are you going to be loose Friday night?" And she just kind of like looked at me, and I was like, "Are you going to be available?" You know, I should have said available, but she just kind of blushed. And of course, I learned that that's not what you want to say. So I didn't get the date, but hey, you know. Cultural humility and grief. I really want to emphasize the bottom there. Again, I can't emphasize it enough. It is a good thing to ask when you do not know. Part of cultural humility is to say, hey, do it an intake, doing a first assessment. What are some of your cultural traditions at the end of life? And how can we respect that? And how can we honor that? I confess I don't really know much about your culture. Would you mind sharing with me? Cultural humility is to be aware of your own biases. And secondly, it does bring the strong emphasis on asking questions about someone's culture. It is much better than for you to think, okay, I got to remember the competency of all these cultures and I got to memorize. You're not going to know all this stuff anyway. I mean, I got a good memory and I'm an academic person, but man, it just messes with you because sometimes you can even confuse stuff from one culture with another. It's always better to ask. And just say, tell me. And when you do so, it shows that you are respecting them and then you have a good conversation. Cultural humility and religion and spirituality. I would say that not everybody's religious, but everybody's spiritual. that everybody tries to make meaning out of life and wants to kind of bring some balance in their lives. And there is a strong sense in all of us to feel connected. And I would recommend for you that as a director of a facility or as a person who works as staff in a facility, that if you assess and say, can you tell me a little bit about your background and how you make sense out of this world, how you make meaning? If they are not religious and you want to get a chaplain involved, do not refer to my role as a chaplain. I would say it's fair to say, would you like a spiritual counselor to come and speak to you? And putting emphasis on their spirituality rather than using religious language. There's already a big shift to move away from chaplain, which is a kind of a very religious word, to using the idea of a spiritual counselor. But just be aware that you want to be fluctuating on that. When I was at a research medical center, we had a Hindu patient that didn't want to take her pain pills because she wanted to experience the pain as a way to prepare herself for the next life. And it was a form of penance that she wanted to do. And so, and to try to work with that patient and the doctor who wants to make sure that this person is taken care of, we had to work with not just the patient, but the patriarch in that family, because the patriarch in the family makes the decisions for the patient. So there I'm leaning again towards competency, but I think that I just want to say that I want to emphasize that it's good to ask the family, how do you honor your loved ones' traditions in the end, and how can we do the same? Okay, so I'm almost done, and I'm thinking that I want to have some time for question and answer. Here's a kind of an acronym where you could use as a way to assess FICA, faith, importance, and community. I'm going to skip that a little bit. Culture, humility, and death and dying. Who can touch the body? It is better to ask before and then to have the mood change because you violate the cultural norm without knowing you did. Who is going to bathe the deceased? Some religions want to do that. The family wants to do that. Some in the Jewish faith, the body has to be buried within 24 hours. There is so many different things that we want to be a part of and understand. It's better to ask. So in summary, how to practice cultural humility. I guess I did not fancy here. I didn't even show you what, sorry. So how to practice cultural humility. When in doubt, ask questions. Practice active listening. Be present even in moments of silence. Show respect and non-judgment. Refrain from projecting your own beliefs and practices on others. How can hospice help? There's quite a bit there that I have to just say that right now I have 63 patients in 3 different counties. And I see patients in their homes and I also see them in facilities. I have some patients that I have for over a year and a half. But Medicare pays for usually assessment for 6 months to the end of life. But there's a lot of misunderstanding about what hospice can do and help and support the facility. We have so much support as a hospice that we bring to a facility to help support the staff that is there. The next slide is just hospice eligibility. There is just so many things there. And for you as a staff, you can make a discerned, informed decision. I'll leave this slide up here if you want to take a picture of it later. And so, and I'll come back to that slide. And here's the interdisciplinary team. I'm so privileged to work together with with 6 registered nurses on our team. We have 6 home health aides. We have a music therapist and a massage therapist, a social worker. I'm the chaplain. And then we have volunteers, and we have a bereavement counselor. And then obviously we have the doctor, and then we meet an interdisciplinary meetings every 2 weeks and go over all the patients. And so it's just such a joy for me. We chart on point care on our phone. And so I know what's going on when the nurses chart, and I see what's going on before I go and see a patient. I can read what everybody's doing, and I chart for every patient I see. And so out of all of the, and I'll go back to that on the previous slide. Out of all of my years as I've been in a pastorate for over 30 years, and I've been a professor. Right now, I supervise PhD students in Nairobi, Kenya, online, and I've gone out there to go and work with these students. And I also engage people in South Africa, pastors there. And so, but out of all the things of that, I wrote a PhD on the theology of love. And here with hospice and doing and working with facilities and working with what I do now as hospice, it's the most meaningful thing I've ever done in my life. It's not a theology of love on a bookshelf. No, it's love and shoe leather right there in real life. And so thoughts, questions. I think we have until what time do we have?
10 to.
10 to?
Until 10.
Sorry, I went a little long. Any thoughts, any questions, any reflections on anything?
Balance the preferences of the person who has passed away with needs of people who are still here.
Yeah. She's asking, how do you balance the preferences of the person who dies with the needs of the people who are still here? Are you talking about staff or the family? Both, yeah. Yeah. I think it's very, very important to acknowledge it, that it happened. Take the time to don't think, well, I'm not sure if it really impacted that patient. Sometimes, especially when people lose their boundaries and they become kind of aggressive patient, and it's hard to care for that patient, then we have a tendency to want to not honor that patient because this patient was a difficult patient. And I think that the deeper you go in as a counselor or in your role is to say, I am not going to make this personal. I am going to honor that person out of the dignity of their humanity and knowing their story and who they are for the families. And so I think it's just really knowing the stories of the people, knowing the stories of the family, what's important to them, and to then find ways to honor that. We, either through serving their favorite meal, the next time and say, hey, this meal is in honor of so and so passed away because we honor her, And so the creativity of that on the staff will blow your mind when you say people come up with ideas. So, but it's just bringing it to them. I won't do it now, but part of your work is just to deal with silence and when it gets awkward and nobody says anything. And that's when we want to fill the gap and say, okay, we want to control it. But your love for your patient is uncontrolling. That means that you need to be okay with silence. It's okay if somebody doesn't say anything. And it may appear now that I was not really good for that, because I may have just stayed in silence for a while. And then you're thinking, what's this guy going to do now? Because nobody's saying anything.
I'm an ombudsman and I get a lot of questions from facilities about they might have a resident or someone who they did not know that well. Maybe they're already cognitively impaired and they're not able to get much about their life or what was important to them, or they might not have much family and they're at the point of dying and they say, what do we do?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's, I run into that when the patient is part of the state and they have a guardian, and there's no family at all. I think that we want to do the basic things of honoring the dignity of a person's life. First of all, to acknowledge it and to pay respect for them. And if you don't have a lot to go on, I went to a funeral one time. At the gravesite, there was a casket, canopy, and the daughter and a friend, nobody else. So I go there because I'm the chaplain, I've been a chaplain, and 1 o'clock, the time came, I said, well, who's officiating? And she said, nobody. And then I just sat there with her. I said, would you mind if I say a few things? And then, because I've done it for 30 years. And I officiated on the spot for her. And then she just came to me, put her head on my shoulder and cried for a long, long time. And this is the caregiver where there's nobody around. Nobody else can. It's not really answering your question, but I think that if you do have family, but they've been there a short time and there is a family, it's really important to ask the question, how can we honor your loved one? And be okay with asking that question. I'll conclude with just say, one thought. I was, happened about 3 weeks ago. Saturday night, 10 o'clock at night, the nurse, one of our nurses called me. She said, Johan, my patient is dying, actively dying. He's Catholic, and his sister is calling from Ohio, and she wants last rites for her brother. And I'm a Protestant chaplain, but obviously I'm an interfaith chaplain. But the cardinal had given authority to, in an emergency, for clinical chaplains to do last rites, where I do the prayer of indulgence, apostolic prayer of indulgence. And so I said, sure, I'll come, and I kind of designed a little service around that. And so I get there, he's still alive, and I have his sister on the phone from Ohio, and she's right there next to the bed. So it's me, the nurse, and on the phone, the sister from Ohio. And so I did the last rites, and then I sang a cappella, just a song. And then I prayed, and then I said in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. And the moment I said amen, he died. It just freaked us out. And it was just so amazing that it's like he was waiting for that. He was waiting for that. And so it just is, I'm still blown away that somebody can actually, their mind can actually decide when to die. It's such a mysterious thing, you know. But in closing for you, I recognize that as you come into this room, you brought loss with you into this room, and you're sitting with that right now. Some of it is gonna put somewhere. And I honor you for coming to this conference. But I wanted to give you a blessing. And I usually sing a song called Wonderful Peace with the families when their loved one dies. And I wanted to sing it a cappella as a way to ask that God will give you peace and to honor the passion and the calling and the gifts that God has given you. And just to let you know that God loves you and that you are remembered and he sees you. And so I am going to pick a key and I hope I can stay on it. I'll just kind of do it. Peace, peace, wonderful peace, coming down from the Father above. Sweep over my spirit forever, I pray. In fathomless billows of love. Peace, peace, wonderful peace, coming down from the Father above. Sweep over my spirit forever, I pray. In fathomless billows of love. Thank you for coming.